You are listening to The Michael Lodge Show. Wealth, business, and taxes. Oh yeah, and some politics. Let's get started.
And welcome. Good morning if you're getting up early or if it's at nighttime, wherever you're listening to me, I'm glad you're here. I'm always glad when a listener pops by, sits down, has a cup of coffee with me, and we're going to discuss some things today. I think that needs to be discussed because we've seen in the past many years now that the news and the media out there are just no longer journalists. So this morning we are going to talk about, and we're going to go through, the Code of Ethics of Journalism. Now, you would be surprised, yes, there is a code out there that they follow. The problem is that it's written, it's published, it's on a website through the Society of Journalists, or Journalism, I should say. But practicing the Code of Ethics is not being practiced by any journalist that's out there. There might be a couple or two, but it's very difficult to find that, especially in the mainstream media now. And we've seen it. We've heard it. We've experienced it as we have turned on our televisions, turned on the CNN, Fox News, MSNBC, CNBC, whatever else is out there, ABCDEFG. They're out there. And they begin telling their side of how they feel about whatever the subject is. It's not about reporting on that subject. It's about them telling you how they believe and how they feel, and then they back up their feelings with other expert witnesses, if you want to call them that. The problem is that when we get down to the nitty-gritty of journalism, it's about reporting the news. I looked up, in fact, in my book, Ethically Thinking, it's not that hard. It's on Amazon, you can get it, by Michael Lodge. If we look at the term news, or the meaning of it, it is described as the following. Number one, newly received or noteworthy information, especially about recent or important events. Number two, a broadcast or published report of news. Number three, information not previously known to someone. Number four, a printed or broadcast report of information from important events in the world, the country, or the local area. Now, that's what the news is really all about, right? It's about reporting the news. But we don't get that anymore. I mean, we get it in the local side. If there's anything that you want news, the local side does a pretty good job in reporting the news. They're very good at that. You don't hear any personal opinions or anything. Sometimes it slips out, but you don't really see it as much on local news. You just don't, which is a good thing because at least we're getting kind of a good sense of news. So this morning, I'm going to go through the Society of Journalism's Code of Ethics. And we're going to go, it's not that long. How many pages? It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 pages. But it's only because I put it in big print so that people could read it and understand it. That's why it's so long. But on my book, it starts on page 29. So the first part of the Code of Ethics for Journalism reads as this. Bright, bold letters. Seek truth and report it. Ethical journalism should be accurate and fair. Journalists should be honest and courageous in gathering, reporting, and interpreting information. Journalists should take responsibility for the accuracy of their work. Verify information before releasing it. Use original sources whenever possible. Remember that neither speed nor format excuses inaccuracy. Provide context. Take special care not to misinterpret or oversimplify in promoting, previewing, or summarizing a story. Gather, update, and correct information throughout the life of a news story. Be cautious when making promises, but keep the promises they make. Identify sources clearly. Let me repeat that again. Identify sources clearly. The public is entitled to as much information as possible to judge the reliability and motivations of sources. Consider sources, motivates before promising anonymity. Reserve anonymity for sources that may face danger, retribution, or other harm and have information that cannot be obtained elsewhere. Explain why anonymity was general. Diligently seek subjects of news coverage to allow them to respond to criticism or allegations or wrongdoing. Avoid undercover or other surreptitious methods of gathering information unless traditional open methods will not yield information vital to the public. Be vigilant and courageous about holding those with power accountable. Give voice to the voiceless. Support the open and civil exchange of views, even views they find repugnant. I don't like that word repugnant, right? And I'm afraid that there's a lot of journalists out there that think a lot of our opinions as just human beings is repugnant because it doesn't agree with their thought process or their political views. Continuing on. Recognize a special obligation to serve as watchdogs over public affairs and government. Seek to ensure that public business is conducted in the open and that public records are open to all. Provide access to source material when it is relevant and appropriate. Boldly tell the story of the diversity and magnitude of the human experience. Won't you know it as I'm reading this? The clouds part and the sun comes out and the sun is coming directly into my eyes. My gosh. Mother Nature, I tell you, when I'm trying to do a podcast, Mother Nature, kind of cool it, okay? Then in big bold letters, it says, seek sources whose voices are seldom heard. Avoid stereotyping. Journalists should examine the ways their values and experiences may shape their reporting. Liberal advocacy and commentary. I'm sorry, not liberal. It slipped. Label advocacy and commentary. Never deliberately distort facts or context, including visual information. Clearly label illustrations and reenactments. Never plagiarize. Always attribute. Then they go on by saying, minimize harm. Ethical journalism treats sources, subjects, colleagues, and members of the public as human beings deserving of respect. Journalists should balance the public's need for information against potential harm and discomfort. Pursuit of the news is not a license for arrogance or undue intrusiveness. Show compassion for those who may be affected by news and coverage. Use heightened sensitivity when dealing with juveniles, victims of sex crimes, and sources of subjects who are inexperienced or unable to give consent. Consider cultural differences in approach and treatment. Recognize the legal access of information differs from an ethical justification to publish or broadcast. Realize that private people have a greater right to control information about themselves than public figures and others who seek power, influence, or attention. Weigh the consequences of publishing or broadcasting personal information. Avoid pandering or lurid curiosity, even if others do. Balance a subject's rights to a fair trial with the public's right to know. Consider the implications of identifying criminal suspects before they face legal charges. Consider the long-term implications of the extended reach in parameters of publication. Provide updated and more complete information as appropriate. Now that's an amazing thing, isn't it? In that section right there, I have not seen that practiced by journalists on CNN, Fox News, any of those. It's kind of like tabloid news now. In fact, it's not even news, it's just tabloid. Tabloid information that's being distributed to us on a daily basis by people who call themselves journalists. So we read on. Act independently. Excuse me. Act independently. The highest and primary obligation of ethical journalists is to serve the public. Journalists should avoid conflicts of interest, real or perceived, disclose unavoidable conflicts, refuse gifts, favors, fees, free travel, and special treatment, and avoid political and other outside activities that may compromise integrity or impartiality or may damage credibility. Be wary of sources offering information for, I'm turning my page, for favors or money. Do not pay for access to news. Identify content provided by outside sources, whether paid or not. Deny favored treatment to advertisers, donors, or any other special interests, and resist internal and external pressure to influence coverage. Distinguish news from advertising and shun hybrids that blur the lines between the two. Prominently label sponsored content. In bold letters it says, be accountable and transparent. Ethical journalism means taking responsibility for one's work and explaining one's decisions to the public. Journalists should explain ethical choices and processes to audiences. Encourage a civil dialogue with the public about journalistic practices, coverage, and news content. Respond quickly to questions about accuracy, clarity, and fairness. Acknowledge mistakes and correct them promptly. The word is promptly. Promptly. Acknowledge mistakes and correct them promptly and prominently. Explain corrections and clarifications carefully and clearly. Expose unethical conduct in journalism. Include within their organizations. Abide by the same high standards they expect of others. So as we read through this, we've heard a lot of things that journalists are not doing. They have gone to the wayside and said, I don't need to do that anymore because now I am part of the opinion process of America. So you have people that are like Don Lemon and Como and other people on Fox who literally sit there and give their opinion about a new subject. So when we get to that point, they're no longer journalists. What they are entertainers. Should they be held accountable? Yes, because they are promoting their own political views. And that is still a part of journalism. When they make a mistake, It says to promptly notify the public of that mistake and correct it and explain your correction. Very seldom do we ever see that in journalism today. In this tabloid mindset of news reporting, they just spout it out, and they don't even know if the source that they're giving is even legitimate. But it's an unknown source, and that's where they get into so much trouble, this unknown source. We've seen it so many times on the New York Times and Washington Post. They have these unknown sources. I am of the opinion at the moment, and I'm just a podcaster, okay? I am not a journalist. I'm just an entertainer. I'm here to entertain you and talk about subjects. That's all I'm doing. But I am of the opinion that once individuals who call themselves journalists begin giving their own political opinions, and then they surround themselves with people who say that they're experts in this field, and they use them to promote and to push their own political agenda, they are no longer journalists, but they are political activists. And when you're on television, you are not, and if you're working for a news organization, and I'm hoping that news organization has a code of ethics, because in the next few days I am going to be writing all of these news agencies, and I'm going to be asking to see their code of ethics. I want to know what they require of their journalists, and are they practicing them? We already have a code of ethics through the Society of Journalism. Does that news organization also have a code of ethics? And are they practicing it? Because the journalist side of news, ethics is not even considered anymore. It is no longer considered. And that's where we get into trouble, because now we have political activists on the news, in writing, in newspapers, in magazines, giving their opinions as journalists on a specific news subject and pushing their own agenda. So we have gotten way far from this aspect of good journalism, ethical journalism. We have become part of this tabloid mentality. And I tell you where I think things went wrong. A lot of these individuals became bloggers. And they became very famous for putting out their own blogs. Some of them worked for very good news organizations. But they became bloggers. And they felt that through that media outlet of blogging, that they could present their own political views. And then others in the journalism world began saying, okay, if he can promote his views on his own personal blog, then I'm going to do it. And then pretty soon, these bloggers became part of the news process. Huntington Post was originally, and it still is, a blogging organization. There are independent bloggers posting their blogs on Huntington Post. And that became newsworthy. No one did any fact-checking on the bloggers. No one held them accountable. No one held them up to a code of ethics that required them to follow a specific way of reporting. But bloggers just promote their own opinion. And then that became part of the main news cycle, and that is where I feel that we got into a lot of problems. I am very concerned at where we're heading at the moment. And I feel that we as listeners have the responsibility of holding these news organizations accountable and making sure that they are very ethical in the way that they report their news. Because over the past few years, we have seen really bad news stories. Stories that had to be or should have been retracted. Downright out lies. In order to curb the opinion of the American public towards a certain political agenda. It happens on Fox News, it happens on CNN, it happens on all of the mainstream media. Because they have forgotten about the code of ethics in reporting the news. So we as Americans, we have to hold them accountable. I'm getting tired of it personally. I want to hear the news. I want to be able to go to a news source and just hear the news. Even if it's 24 hours a day and it's just pure news, that's what I want to hear. I do not want to be entertained by journalists who call themselves journalists anyway. People who call themselves journalists. Listen, a blogger is not a journalist, okay? And if you are taking the personal opinion or the political opinion of a blogger, that is not legitimate. Because that blogger can say and do whatever he wants. No one's holding him accountable. So that blogger can promote any political agenda or social agenda that he or she wants to do without anybody checking them out. So Americans, listen, we have got to hold these so-called journalists accountable. And when you see something that is not ethical, call them out on it. That's our responsibility as listeners, that when we hear a lie, or we see a political agenda, or we see that they are not identifying their sources, call them out on it. Because when they're unwilling to identify a source, that's not journalism. That's hearsay. That's tabloid. So Washington Post, you better get your act together because you have been really guilty about these anonymous sources. If I hear that one more time from you guys, I'm coming after you. I'm going to come after you. Now you're probably wondering, why is Mike Lodge talking about this on a business podcast? Well, it's very simple. As I've said before, I'm a trained accountant, and I'm a mediator, and I mediate business issues. And in both industries, the accounting industry and the mediation industry, we have a code of ethics. In fact, right now, as I'm talking into this microphone, to the right of me is a code of ethics for accountants. It's on my wall every single day. And in front of me, I have a code of ethics on mediation. And I have that in front of me every day. These are the set of rules that guide me in my industry that I represent. However, journalism has no rules anymore. They have no code of ethics that they follow. Journalism has been tainted by political opinion or by a political agenda. And it is no longer the news. And we have got to get back to that place where we're getting the news. Not opinion. Not a political agenda. Not a blogger who can say whatever they want to say without any fact-checking. We have got to get back to the news. We have got to get back to good reporting. And those media outlets out there, I'm going to put you on warning right now today that I'm holding you accountable. I am a listener. I hear false news. I hear lies, I hear unnamed sources, I am going to hold you accountable. And I'm going to let you know about it. And every American should be doing that. We need to hold the media accountable for the reporting. Listen, this is Mike Lodge. If you have any questions or comments, send me a text at 818-252-5682. Again, that's 818-252-5682. I promise you, in the next few days, we'll get back to business subjects, which I love. Get back to business mediation and everything else, the subjects that can help you through your own business. We've got to get back to that. Right now, this election and the unethical side of journalism has to be discussed right now because we have been affected by it through this election. And that's why I'm talking about it. If I, in my profession, is held to a code of ethics, then so should journalism. Hold them accountable. Listen, you can follow me on my website at www.lodge-co.com. My podcast is on iHeartRadio. It's on Apple Music. It's on Google. It's all over the place. You can find me out there. Michael Lodge, Wealth, Business, and Taxes. Okay, everybody go out there and have a great day. Remember, hold journalists accountable. Talk with you soon. God bless. This podcast has been produced by Michael Lodge, fully focused on content. God bless.